Hi, I'm Lisa Fletcher, and you're in the stream. Today, is political Islam facilitating or hindering the path to reform in the Middle East and North Africa? We speak to professor and prominent author Tariq Ramadan about the possible futures of the Arab uprisings. Joining us on set today is Tariq Ramadan. He is a professor of contemporary Islamic studies at Oxford University. He's also the president of the European Muslim Network in Brussels. That is a think tank that offers policy recommendations on key issues related to the Muslim presence in Europe. Professor Ramadan, welcome to the stream.
Thank you for your invitation.
We are very glad to have you. And across the table is our digital producer, Malika Bilal. She'll be bringing your live feedback and questions and comments into the show today. Malika, some excitement from our community about having Professor Ramadan on the show.
Excitement is an understatement. We have a lot of questions and a lot of comments for Professor Ramadan, and I'll try to get to as many of those as I can during the discussion. But for those of you at home, if you'd like to join the conversation now or throughout the program, tweet us. Use the hashtag AJStream.
I'd also like to welcome our panel in the Google Plus Hangout. Hey guys. Know you're eager to get your comment or question to Professor Ramadan. We'll be doing that very shortly. But for those of you at home, if you'd like to be in future Hangouts, be sure to add us to your circles by going to plus.google.com and searching for the stream.
Hi, my name is Shreen. I'm a Muslim American feminist, and I'm in the stream.
For nearly 2 years, the Middle East and North Africa have been experiencing dramatic change. Popular uprisings swept through Tunisia, Egypt, Libya, and they continue today in countries like Syria and Bahrain. And although they all share some common characteristics, rejection of socioeconomic inequality and a stance against corruption and oppression, the outcomes have really varied. Our guest today suggests that it's just too early to call the Arab uprisings revolutions. He takes a position of cautious, lucid optimism when examining the future of the movements. Professor Tariq Ramadan describes himself as a Muslim reformer. He lectures on theology, ethics, social justice, and interfaith dialogue. In his latest book, Islam and the Arab Awakening, Professor Ramadan calls on Arabs and Muslims to, quote, stop blaming the West for the colonialism and imperialism of the past or for today's attempts at manipulation and control. He also urges them to be, quote, determined to carry out essential reforms with the full participation of all citizens, women and men, from all social classes and religious and cultural backgrounds. So, with the rise of political Islam in the Middle East and North Africa, can essential reforms be made? And that is one of the questions that we want to answer today, Professor Ramadan. But I'd like to start with more of a broad approach. You're very cautious in defining the Arab uprisings, and you're hesitant to call them a revolution. Why is that?
Because, when I started to study what was happening, because, what happened first in Tunisia and then in Egypt, I tried to get a sense of what we knew before and what was happening really. And at the end of the day, I still don't know if we are witnessing unfinished revolutions or unachieved revolutions. But the fact that it came all of a sudden and the people, took into the street and went against, this is something which is not exactly right, because without going towards, a conspiracy theory about who knew what exactly, bloggers and cyber dissidents were trained in the West, in Europe, even in the United States of America, and this was known even by the Mubarak regime and Ben Ali regimes, and people who were coming from training in Europe were afterward put in jail in Egypt, for example. So there was something which was a trend. In 2008, even the American ambassador was writing a note saying that there are young people who want to get rid of the Mubarak regime. This was 3 years before, or 2 years before it started. So the point is that there was a push, and our obsession with the political structure, saying, oh, we are going towards democracy, and only this, it's democracy versus dictatorship, makes us miss or underestimate the economic factors and new actors in the region, what we call the BRIC countries, Brazil, Russia, India, China, South Africa, Turkey, Indonesia. They are now playing and they are entering into a market which is very important. And this was said by George W. Bush in 2003. We are pushing towards democracy. So I think that revolution coming all of a sudden like this, we have to be cautious, try to understand what are the geostrategic consequences and economic consequences of what is happening.
Yeah, and a little later in the show, I want to talk more about the geopolitical challenges, the economic challenges. But I loved in your book this idea idea, and you were just talking about it, is that these revolutions didn't come out of nowhere. But can you tell us a little more about what got them to critical mass?
I think that it's quite clear that it would be impossible for these uprisings or mass demonstration to succeed if there was no problems and ingredients. And if you look at the situation in Tunisia and the situation in Egypt, they were there: corruption, poverty, unemployment, all these, and many people who were visiting Egypt and dealing with Tunisia were saying it's going to implode. There is something which is not going right. The situation is very bad. So we knew that something could happen. So to push towards a positive slogan against the dictators and changing the regimes, all this was possible because we had socioeconomic factors and situations and corruption, and more importantly, the future. Even Gamal Mubarak, who was coming after his father, was dealing with a corrupt system and also dealing with a new way towards East, and this was a challenge even for Western interests. So I think that we have to be cautious with this and say, okay, what is good and irreversible in the whole process? What I call awakening. So there is a mind shift. It's the mindset has changed, and the people in the Arab world today, they are aware that we can get rid of dictators, that we can change the regime. This is the positive thing. We have to rely on this if we want to change for the future, not just being naive, because naivety in the whole thing is very dangerous if we keep on thinking that it's going to work in a simple way.
Well, you just mentioned the word awake, and of course, awakening is the title of your book. And what our community seems to want to talk about is the terminology, and there's agreement on that point. Mo Yunus says, a revolution is judged on the outcome and the change it sparked. It's far too early to compare pre- and post-revolution life. Another from May Al-Hassan, who says, no one said a revolution happened in 18 days. Ask Dr. Ramadan how long the French and US-American revolutions took. And one more from Sana Saeed, who says, it's better to qualify them as social, political paradigm shifts and disturbances, but that's less catchy for headlines. Would you agree with this last one, that it's more of a social and political paradigm shift?
Yes, I think not only this, I really think that we have an intellectual shift and something which is in the mindset. The awakening is in the minds of the people, and this is very positive and very important. Now when the people are telling me, oh, you are going too fast in qualifying it, and it's yes or not a revolution, say, let us see. It might be that at the end it could be, but what I see now, it's not a revolution, neither in Tunisia or in Egypt. Even though in Tunisia now, it's the head country where we can see that things are starting to settle down, but still with the Salafi, with the intra-community tensions that we have to be cautious. So terminology matters, and when the people were buying it very quickly, Arab Spring, revolutions, and when I was criticized by Arabs saying, oh, it means that you don't trust the people. It doesn't mean that I don't trust the people. I don't trust the governments.
Not trusting the government. You just mentioned Tunisia. I want to go to our Google Plus Hangout because we have Mariam Masmoudi, who's worked in Tunisian civil society, who has a question for you. Go ahead, Mariam.
Yes, Assalamu alaikum, Dr. Ramadan. I'm very glad to be a part of this conversation with you. So I wanted to jump right into, I think what the heart of the matter is Islam and the upcoming Arab states and hopefully new democracies. I wanted to get your opinion on the way that Islam and Islamic values and people's interpretations of these values are making their ways into Tunisia, specifically what I'll be talking about, and certainly Egypt post the fall of dictatorship. For instance, in Tunisia now, in a draft constitution, we have an article on that condemns blasphemy. And I wanted to get your opinion on how such an article, why people think that this is so important, especially coming out of a constituent assembly that is not a majority of Islamists. I find that very interesting, and I wanted to get your take on that. And thank you.
Yes, I think it's a very important question because in the book I'm trying to talk about this Islamic reference. So we can see now the Islamists are even not talking about Islamic states. In Tunisia, in Egypt, they avoid the concept of an Islamic state. They say a civil state with Islamic reference. But still we need to have something which is clearer than that. What does it mean exactly? Because the problem that we have now when it comes to Islam is really who is interpreting. Because we have seen this in just before the last election in Egypt with the Salafi, the literalists, Salafi al-Harfiya, the literalists are coming and they are pushing in a way which is, it's black and white, it's a system which is a closed system. So we have a problem of interpretation. Now, there is something that we have to learn from all what happened in the Middle East, is that the Islamic reference, willing it or not, is going to play a very important role. The question is, which kind of Islamic reference? Are we talking about people who are ready for 6 principles that are not negotiable? Rule of law, equal citizenship, universal suffrage, accountability, separation of power, and distinguishing the 2 authorities between state and the religious reference. Are we able to go towards this? If this is the case, this is something that is positive. With this question, what we have now is people are now trying sometimes to instrumentalize the Islamic reference. So by saying, oh, we are Democrats, it's just to please the West. But we are going to be tough on some, ethical behavior within the society. It's just to appease the people by saying we are still Muslim. At the end of the day, we should rely on the Islamic ethics, but we should also protect the principles and freedom for the people, Muslims and people of other faiths, atheists and agnostic. And we cannot just prevent the people from just talking. Now, within a Muslim majority society, when it comes to blasphemy, it's not by coming with this and saying this is a law that we are going to implement that we are going to solve the problem. It's much more about educating the people and let the people speak, but at the same time educate the people to know what means decency and respect towards the other. So it's much more about this than about a very formal Islamic reference.
So when we look at Tunisia and we look at Egypt, you're much more optimistic about Tunisia than you are about Egypt. What's working and what's not working?
No, I'm cautious in both situations. What I was saying at the beginning is Tunisia is going better, but what we can see now is that with a very strong presence of the Salafi and the literalist. And now, I was there, I was in the middle of a struggle between the secularist and the Islamist. And they were, one are saying we are the progressive and you are the reactionary, the others are saying we are the guardian of Islam and the tradition. I think it's a very difficult situation because in both situations, the true questions are not tackled, are not handled. My concern is not about how many women are wearing the headscarf in the streets to know if it's it's free or not. My concern is how much are we investing in education, in the job market. If you want to talk about empowerment of women, don't talk about the headscarf. Talk about how many are in schools, how many are getting opportunities in the job market. If not, this is just symbols, and symbols matter, but at the same time they are misleading our assessment of the situation. And what about education? Look at what is happening with the Arabic language, with our cultures. No creativity, nothing is produced in arts, in movies, in even music. I know that some they think that music is not lawful in Islam. It is. Now we have to come to this creativity. You want to be serious about democratization in the Arab world? Come with a culture, a sense of belonging. Creativity is part of democracy. Democracy is not about elections only. It's not just a formal process of procedures. It's about living in a society where you feel good, where you feel that you have a value, when you feel that your culture is giving you something.
But in a democracy that reflects the Middle East, not that reflects the West necessarily.
That's the point. The point is that we have shared principles. Let the people find their models.
And Professor Ramadan, from your lips to our community's ears, Hind Maki on Twitter says, I wish the Middle East and North African Islamist parties would implement Tariq Ramadan's focus on ethics as opposed to legal literalism. And I'll ponder that. I'd like to go to Google Plus now because we mentioned Egypt. It's a fast-moving show. We mentioned Egypt, and I'd like to go to Sharif Nassif, who's a student and a journalist. Go ahead, Sharif.
Hey there. I have a question specifically it touches on political Islam, specifically within Egypt. And I kind of want to preface this question by some of the events that happened today, just a couple minutes from Tahrir Square, where some 2,000 protesters went to the American embassy and actually breached the walls in protest of an anti-Islamic film that was created by some Coptic Christians. And basically my question is, to what extent is there a risk that governance by political Islam from the elite level will translate to a sort of a misplaced hyper-Islamization of society on a different street, by educated classes? And is there a risk that this will fuel sort of religious tensions or even violence or even attacks on secular way of life in Egypt?
So I'm
Were you
not
able to catch that?
Yes, I think it's about what is happening now with the American embassy and also about the Islamic reference. If I got the question, I think that we are now facing something that we have to take seriously, which is instrumentalizing the Islamic reference on every side. And I wrote an article, it's in the book, but it's also on my website, on playing with Islam. So when you are, for example, facing, freedom of expression and movies, it's very, very easy for a government to show that they are protecting the Islamic reference, to go against a movie and to say, this is what we don't want because we are the guardian of the tradition. And we are playing with the popular emotions. Mm-hmm. And I would say, I'm facing in the West, here in the United States and in Europe, the populists. And the populists, they are very dangerous. Why? Because they are playing with popular emotions. It's emotional politics. What we have now in the Middle East is sometimes the same, is just to show that we are not like the West. So we use emotions and popular emotions to say we are Muslims and we are rejecting. That's not the way forward. The way forward is not, you are not more yourself because you are not like the other. You are more yourself when you are reconciling your principles and your behavior, your vision and your being. This is what is important now in the mindset of the Muslims. Too many Muslims, and this is why, when you see people very happy because they are protesting in front of the American embassy, is this the point? Is this one of the main challenges of the Egypt today, is to have 2,000 people in front of the American embassy? What I would like is the American embassy to stop supporting the military and to support much more the people. And instead of talking about movies and just thinking that this is the way we are going to solve anything by rejecting the West through arts and entertainment.
Well, speaking of demonstrations, it reminds me of something in your book where you talk about the protest movements that have broken out, and you say short-term and massive outbursts of indignation with short-term vision and mass character may reveal an absence of long-term democratic commitment. So the question then becomes how do Arab and Muslim majority societies move forward in a meaningful way? How do they take these protests from the street and turn that into a solution?
Yes, I think, and this is the right question. The strength of all these movements where they were united against the dictator. Now, what are they for? What do they stand for? This is the weakness of all these movements, because we don't have a vision. So we are, obsessed with this polarization we were talking about and not coming with the true question. And the true question is, how are we going to act against corruption? How are we going to act for social justice? What about the economic system? Because what we see now is all these movements are ready to accept the economic global order. And they are buying, the IMF is there, World Bank is there, and the relationship are accepted on this basis. So the free market. So you can be an Islamist as long as you are a capitalist. It's okay. That's not a problem. Go ahead. And we see this with the petromonarchies. So the point is this question about economy, the cultural question I was talking about, it's also very important. So we have here a series of questions that we have to tackle with a vision. What is the vision? Unfortunately, the civil societies in Muslim majority countries and the intellectuals on both sides, so to speak, secularists and Islamists, are just now confronting their views and trying to get their justification by the presence of the other, the opponent. And I think that this is not the way forward. I think we have very important challenges.
Sorry to cut you off, but you asked what is the vision, and I think there's a commenter in our Google Plus Hangout that wants to know where that vision and these uprisings, where the Shia are included in that. Let's go to Tariq who is a professor at Swarthmore. Go ahead, Tariq.
Yes, I wanted to ask about if we are indeed to concede that there exists this binary between the so-called secularists and the Islamists, what is it that you see are the possibilities and potential for inclusion of the Shia in places where there have been uprisings?
That's a critical question, and I am happy to have these questions here, because I think that there is something that we need to discuss, when it comes to the Islamic reference, we have different interpretations. And one of the challenges is that many people, they want uniformity. In Islam, there is no uniformity. There is one Islam and many interpretations. We have to deal with diversity. We need to promote something which is an accepted diversity of views among even the Sunni and among the Shia. Meaning by this that we have literalists, that we have reformists, that we have Sufi, that we have rationalists. This is part of Islam. Islam is a very wide path. You have your way of walking. As long as you are not outside what is right and what is wrong, you are a Muslim, and that's fine. Let us have this discussion about our diversity of interpretations. This is one. The second is about the relationship between Sunni and Shia. And I think that we need to be clear on this, that as long as we are not bringing the Shia and the Sunni together and working on the questions that we had before, not on very simplistic positioning on, our theological differences, but the common challenges. And I'm sorry to say, if you look at what is happening in the Middle East now, after the Iraq and Iran war, the situation in Syria, the situation in Iraq is just so easy for anyone who want to play with the Muslims in the Middle East. He would play the Shia against the Sunni, and it works. Not only it works, myself on my website and after the book, I got so many criticisms coming from people saying, you are against Bashar al-Assad because you are a Sunni, and we are supporting him because he is supporting and protecting the Shia. How come are we going to support a dictator only because he is a Sunni or Shia? If he's a dictator, he's a dictator. And I would say exactly the same in any country. When the people are saying in Bahrain, for example, it's only a question between Sunni and Shia, it's not a question. It's a question of a dictatorship that is not letting the people be free. So let us talk about principles and not being driven by our belonging to being a Shia and being a Sunni. And this is one of the main challenges. I'm sorry to see that intellectuals, Muslim scholars, and people on the ground are all buying this, supporting it, and nurturing this emotional belonging to Shia and Sunni is not going to work. We have to bring the Shia and the Sunni together in the name of the common challenges.
I want to talk more about that in our post-show, but first, I know we want to get to Google+.
Bringing them together, it begs a really a good question that our community is asking, our Google Plus members are asking. This is from Sayed on Twitter, who says, why is Saudi Arabia and other rich Islamic countries not involved in the Islamic uprising? And I'd like to go to Ezra on Google Hangout because she has a follow-up to that. Go ahead, Ezra.
Yeah, I actually had, my question was about Saudi Arabia too. Considering how the Saudi monarchy has been using the Wahhabi ideology and imposing it on any uprising or pockets of uprising that are happening in the Gulf or had happened, and they've just kind of squelched it completely by using that. And how is that going to help in any kind of reform that if we are to expect anything from these countries, or a little bit of uprising from anywhere around the Gulf?
Professor, you have about a minute to answer that question.
Yes, that's a challenge in itself. But I would say that this question, once again, it's important with the petromonarchies and the Salafi trend. And what we have seen over the last 10 years is a change with the Salafi presence. Yesterday, they were telling us they are not involved in anything which has to do with politics. They were against democracy. Now they are involved in it, and they are playing a very important role. The petromonarchies, all the petromonarchies are protected today from anything which has to do with democratization. Saudi Arabia, Qatar, and others, and even Bahrain, they are protected from this internal thinking. So now what we have is people promoting the Salafi trend in all the countries. They are playing a very important role in Tunisia, in Egypt, and other countries. And I think that this is a challenge in itself. So I don't have a problem with the conservative or the literalists. They have a right to be literalists. But when they are playing from behind the scene, promoting democracies elsewhere, and not going through reform within the country, we have to be critical by saying this is dividing and this is promoting divisions between the Muslims, and we have to be clear that it's not the money that is going to be used just to promote democracies for others. We need to be quite clear that this kind of interpretation of Islam is in itself problematic, and that it's not going to work if we are promoting vision of Islam that are very, very narrow-minded, black and white.
Going to stop you there, and we are going to continue this conversation in our online post show. So stick around. The stream is coming up at stream.aljazeera.com. Welcome back to the Stream's online post show. We're continuing our discussion with Professor Tariq Ramadan about his book Islam and the Arab Awakening, and we're getting his perspective on the uprisings in the Middle East and the potential for long-term meaningful change. We were talking a little while ago about Sunni and Shia and these opposing views and the fractionalization, and what's the unifying voice?
To tell you the truth, if we think about this now, today, it's very, very rare. We don't really have people coming and working at different levels. So I think that the Muslim intellectuals and the scholars and us here, we have to come together in a strong way, to come with, at the end of the day, it's a decision that we have to take. Are we supporting principles? And if we support principles, it means a dictator is a dictator. And a country which is Sunni and Shia and oppressing or torturing or killing people, that's not acceptable. I'm not only talking about Syria, we can talk about what happened in Bahrain and other countries. We have to be clear, or in Iraq, we have to be clear, the human dignity does not belong to your religious affiliation. وَلَقَدْ كَرَّمْنَا بَنِي آدَمَ. This is what is said in the Quran. We gave dignity to human being. Even a non-Muslim, even a Christian, even an atheist, he has a dignity, she has a dignity. We cannot just have a selective approach. So if we have to come with something which is an ethical ground when it comes to politics, let the Muslims be consistent with this. So consistency is something that can help us to come together. If only we are courageous enough to say what should be said to dictators, whoever they are, and to people with whoever we are as, member of communities.
And Professor, speaking of the approach, there's a tweet here from Shuja Rabbani, who's read the book, and he says, I would love to ask about what he states as selective support for dictatorships in the Middle East by the West.
Oh yes, when the people are talking about, Islamists and say, okay, we should not support Islamists, we should support democracy, and say, okay, look at what is happening with even the petromonarchies, the relationship, in some countries they cannot drive, women cannot drive, there is no right for opposition, people are in jail, and there is no democracy, no freedom, and we don't care in the West. At the end of the day, if you are a dictator, but you protect our geostrategic interests and money and oil, that's fine. So it's a selective, denunciation or rejection of dictatorship depending on the interest. And when today we have people coming to us telling us, oh, we are with the Egyptians, we are with the Tunisians, where for 40 years, 30 years, they were the supporting dictators, I think it's a joke. So let us say, okay, you are supporting now the people, be consistent, support the people everywhere. And if we are serious about democracy, I would say exactly the same for Palestinians, because the lost people in the whole process are the Palestinians. We don't talk about them. They are completely lost, and we speak about, opening up. What about Gaza? What about the West Bank? I think that, and the whole equation in the Middle East is very important here, because we are just talking about Egypt, Tunisia, and we don't understand its regional reality. There is a balance of power. There are new actors, and the relationship there is also very much based on the conflict between Palestinians and Israel. And it's as if it's not there. We are forgetting this, and I think we have to be quite serious about the selective approach when it comes to human dignity. I'm sorry to say today, if we are serious about it, if you are an Arab, if you are an Afghani, if you are someone in the Middle East, your blood has less value than any blood of people who are supporting your interest or a Westerner, and that's not acceptable.
Let's talk about Turkey for a minute. Is it a model?
It's quite interesting, and when I was saying that many of the young Islamists in Egypt, for example, in Tunisia, were saying, oh, we are not following the Iranian model, we are following the Turkish model. When I went to Turkey, they were very happy because they say, oh, you are saying that we are the model. I say, no. I think that what they have been trying to do over the last 10 years, it's interesting because they are dealing with a secular society, and we were told 10 years ago, oh, they are going to implement Sharia, it's going to be an Islamist country. And they are doing very well in many issues. They are acting against corruption. They are promoting true democratic processes. That's very good. Now, we still have problems with freedom for the minorities, whereas the relationship with power is going to be problematic. Are we going towards a presidential system or still a prime minister dealing with it? What is going to be the role of Erdogan in the coming years is something that we have to ask. Now, the other question is working on social justice. Turkey is doing very well in economic terms, but still it's entering the global economic order with no challenge, with not challenging the system in itself. So it's as if we are happy with it because they are neoliberal in the way they deal with the economic system. I have questions about this. So it's interesting in political terms. I still want to see what is going to be the economic strategy in the future, knowing that at the same time, the fact that they are opening embassies in Africa, in southern countries, shifting towards the east, dealing with China, dealing with the multipolar world, is quite interesting. So they might be smart, and once again, we should not be too fast in judging what they are doing.
Let's get one last tweet in here. There's so many of them coming, so it's hard to kind of sort through them, but this one is from Pear Oil, who says, I agree, move on to post-colonialism mindsets, but understand and appreciate that it's still a healing process. And so, of course, if that's a healing process, then the uprisings and this not quite revolutionary process is also one.
Yes, but I think that once again, when I was talking about, to get rid of this mindset, my hope, what I would like the people who are listening to us or watching us get from all what I'm trying to say. We need in the Arab world, and not only the Arab world, in the global south, the people to understand that at the end you should become the subject of your history and not the object of the perceptions of the other. The West, by definition, is going to protect its interests. Who do you want to be in the whole game? Are you going to blame and to blame again and to say the past is the past and we still are now dealing with it? Or are we getting a vision for the future and you say, okay, we are not naive. I don't trust governments, I don't trust power, I trust people. But this energy that should come from the new generations that we have, and many of the young people who were in Midan al-Tahrir, who want this freedom, they should come with something which is try to find your way based on your principles. The West is not to be idealized, because I am coming from the West. I am living in Europe, and I know how much our democracies are facing crisis today. We have technocrats that are now dealing with the authority. We didn't vote for them, and they are coming, and this is the economic powers and the economic multinationals and that are now taking over. We have to be critical and let the people think about your energy, your creativity be the subject of your history instead of blaming the others for doing what they want to do to you.
I can't think of a better note to end this on. Professor Ramadan, thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks a lot.
Really appreciate having you, and thanks to everybody in our Google Plus Hangout. Before we go, though, Malika's got a few other leads that we're following.
University students in Hong Kong are skipping class, but it's to demand the withdrawal of curriculum they call Communist Party brainwashing. Thousands rallied outside the Chinese University of Hong Kong in a protest captured online with the hashtag National Education. Demonstrators in the semi-autonomous Chinese city are calling on the government to scrap a curriculum of Chinese patriotism classes. Well, following last week's demonstration, which saw tens of thousands take to the streets, the government said the curriculum would be voluntary. But that didn't go far enough for many. The fight against national education continues, Vivian Chow tweets, linking to a photo of strikers wielding umbrellas against the sun as they march. Our next leads from Barcelona, where Global Voices Català brought our attention to this. Huge rally for Catalonia independence. Hashtag Catalonia says yes to independence. Well, that hashtag is one of several being shared online via this website, an aggregator showing tweets and Instagram photos of protesters calling for complete independence from Spain. Up to 1 million people were expected to converge for the rally, photographed here by Instagram user Arna1. And this poster calling for Catalonia to become a new state has also been shared heavily, along with the hashtag Freedom for Catalonia, which garnered 60,000 mentions. And our last lead looks at a new tool that shows which countries have the closest online friendships. Visitors to facebookstories.com can click on a country, like Saudi Arabia, to find its top connectors come from Egypt, from where job-seeking laborers routinely immigrate. We'll be tweeting out links to all of those stories, so keep an eye on our feed at AJ Stream. Lisa?
All right, in tomorrow's show, we ask the question, how much is climate change contributing to droughts, flooding, and other extreme weather events that are causing billions in damage worldwide? Send us your thoughts on that. And until then, we'll see you online.